Thank you. For much of my adult life, since my mid-20s, in fact, I've been in psychotherapy. Mainly the reason is because I process out loud. This is an example of that right here. My most recent therapist I've had for 8 years, her name's Gabrielle. She knows me pretty well. She's gotten me through some really difficult times, including the death of my husband 5 years ago. So I have a very close relationship with her. One day, I'm in a car with my friend John. We're driving along, and I'm telling him something I told Gabrielle. Because we talk about our therapist, and we talk about, he has a therapist, and we talk about dealing with whatever we're dealing with. And John says, my therapist's name is Gabrielle too. Little background on John. We dated for a few dates and decided to be friends. It's good for us both. But now we started to wonder, does Gabrielle know? I said, John, have you ever talked about me to Gabrielle? He doesn't say a word. I think that means yes. And I thought, what happens if your therapist knows that the John in your stories is the same John she sees, and the Catherine in his stories is me? I said, we probably shouldn't tell her. He said, you want to mess with her? I said, John, remember that time you tried to install the Nest thermostats in my house and it didn't go well? Do you remember how I got up on stage at the Wilbur Theater and told that story at a Moth event? And do you remember how you were in the audience? He goes, yeah. He said, I tell my stories to Gabrielle. And he says, as a matter of fact, I told Gabrielle that I went to the Wilbur Theater and saw my friend Catherine tell the story about how I failed to install Nest thermostats in her house. So she knows, and she's known for months. What should we do? Well, she knows about us, but she doesn't know we know. True. Okay, we don't tell her, and we don't mess with her. Okay, so we agreed to this. But then we went away, and I had a couple weeks to think about it. You know, if any of you have experience with therapists, when you really need your therapist, you're thinking about the therapist before the appointment. But when you are doing well and your therapy appointment's coming up and you go, what am I going to talk about? I noticed that recently, in the last few months, I've been telling Gabrielle my stories, using her as a tryout for my Moth stories. Maybe I'm doing okay. So I get on the Zoom with her a couple weeks later. And I said, Gabrielle, I've got a few new stories I want to tell you. She goes, go ahead, tell me. And I said, well, there's the one about my friend Rosemary. And there's one about my tenant. But the one I want to tell you about is the one where my friend John and I found out we have the same therapist. Now, Gabrielle, being a consummate professional, just smiles and looks down and says, therapists have really weird jobs. And I said, you know, I've been thinking about this, Gabrielle. We didn't want you to fire us both. But when we found out that you knew, but you didn't know that we knew, we thought we just wouldn't tell you. But then I realized I could not lie to you. I could not fake it. And I couldn't mess with you. So I decided, given that I'm doing so well, for the first time in a really long time, I'm going to fire myself. And she said, you are doing well. And I said, you know, I could come back if I need to. Get the theme there? Come back. She said, yes, you could come back. And I said, but I'm ready to go. And I thanked her for everything she'd done for me for 8 years. And I said goodbye. When the next time I saw John, I said, I fired myself. She's all yours. Thank you.